So we are here with another Lunch and Learn with our Career Exploration series. This is Greg Bridgman, and I'll allow him to introduce himself and talk about the courses and program he teaches in and how long he's been here with Lake Sumter State College.
Hi folks, my name is Greg Bridgeman. As was said, I have been involved in the criminal justice field since the mid-1970s when I first started into this business. I run the criminal justice program out here as the program manager. I have been here at Lake Sumter since January of 18. Prior to that, I was running a criminal justice program in Christian County, Kentucky, where I also served as a deputy sheriff there for 21 years.
So describe your career path. Where did you go to college or degree program? Were you an officer first and just went to the academy? Just talk about how over the last so many years.
Okay. I graduated high school in 1972. Academies were just really starting to come into their forefront at that time. But I knew from about the middle of high school that this is what I wanted to do for a living. Now, not necessarily being the teacher, but actually going into law enforcement. I started college at a small private university in Iowa. I was recruited to come out there. They offered a pretty good scholarship. So I went to college in Iowa, and unfortunately the year I was there, they closed for bankruptcy in the middle of my freshman year. I was able to complete my freshman year, but then I had to get selected or admitted to another college, and I ended up moving back to Texas, where I'm from, and went to Ranger Junior College in Ranger, Texas, and completed an Associate of Arts degree in Journal Studies. And from there, I went to Hardin-Simmons University in Abilene, Texas, and studied law enforcement. While I was going to college, Iowa, and at Ranger, and at Hardin-Simmons, I worked for the college police departments. In addition to that, during the summers, I worked for the Dallam County Sheriff's Department. My primary job there was to live in the apartment that was attached to the jail to take care of the prisoners at night. Once I completed my schooling, I was commissioned into the Army. I went and spent 12 years on active duty. Came out of the Army, went back into the criminal justice field kind of in a non-traditional type role. I worked in retail loss prevention for a couple of years. Then I went to work for McDonnell Douglas Aircraft Corporation as a government security specialist, where I was responsible for ensuring that all of the governmental security regulations on classified programs were being followed and met. Then in 1995, I went back to Kentucky, and that's where I started with the Christian County Sheriff's Department and teaching at Hopkinsville Community College, running the program there.
So originally you wanted to go into law enforcement.
Yes.
So how did you decide to go into the military? Like, let's back up to that step.
I guess the easiest way to say that was in 1972. It was the last year of the active draft. My draft number was number 6. By going into the Reserve Officer Training Program, I could complete college and then go into the military instead of having to go into the military while I was in college. That's what pushed me that way. I got into the military and I enjoyed the structure, because the military structure is a lot like what you find in law enforcement. So there wasn't that much of a difference. When I originally went in, I wanted to be a military police officer. That didn't work out for myself. I ended up working as an air defense officer, and then I moved into military intelligence, which was a lot of the same types of things that you would do on the military police side.
So then when you got out, you said 12 years, then how did you get that next position?
When I got out, I started looking around, trying to find something to do. At that point, I was living in St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis was not hiring law enforcement officers at the time. So I had the opportunity to go back into the retail loss prevention field. Now in St. Louis, you are on the property that you're responsible for as this loss prevention officer, you're a fully sworn officer just like a police officer. We did our own warrants, we did our own arrests, we did our own court cases, we prepped everything. It was just like being a cop, just not carrying a gun. And I did that for a couple of years. It was interesting. It was more of a stopgap measure, though, because I knew I wanted to go into the work with McDonnell Douglas in their security department, especially working on these classified programs. And it took about 12 months to get there. Quite honestly, I got there through networking. Some of the people I worked with at Kmart, one of the young lady's fathers was head of security out at McDonnell Douglas. She asked me one day what I was doing working at Kmart. And that's ultimately how I ended up going over to McDonnell Douglas. I left McDonnell Douglas because we lost the contract and they laid everybody off. That's one of those things that can happen to you. And that's what ultimately took my wife and I back to Kentucky, where we had been on active duty and gotten out, and we left there. We went back there. She was actually recruited in the medical field to go back there. And I got back to Kentucky, had an opportunity to go to work for the sheriff's department there. I had learned about teaching and enjoying my time in teaching while I was in the Army. I started out as an adjunct instructor for a for-profit school called Drawn's Junior College in Clarksville, Tennessee. And that morphed into me taking that program over, and then Hopkinsville opened up. I went over to Hopkinsville, and I came here because my wife's mother lived down here, and we were actually going to retire. That was my plan. And then Lake Sumter had an opening, and a friend of mine said, you really ought to apply for it. And I did, just because, never dreaming I would get selected for the position.
So when you was working loss prevention,
Mm-hmm.
and then worked for, that was a security agent, the next step, what were some of the similar skill sets that you saw, or they saw in you, or you saw what you did when you were in the military, but also your desire to be in law enforcement? What were some of the similarities?
Well, if you're going to be in loss prevention, you're utilizing typical investigative skills. You're observing people. You're watching for them doing very specific, articulable things that you could go to court with and say, this is what drew my attention to that person. This is why I was watching them. Because you can't just watch somebody because, oh, they don't look right, I'm going to watch them. No, there's got to be a reason. Just like if I were working as a police officer, I have to have reasonable suspicion to stop somebody to have a conversation. The same applies in that other position. Then I've got to be able to detail it out, to write the reports. And what most people don't understand in the criminal justice field is you are doing more time writing than you're doing anything else. Paperwork is about 80% of what you do in this career field. Then, and I enjoyed that because it was, you're making the case when you go to court. You're presenting it in the court just like anyone else who would go to court. If I went as a loss prevention officer, I was the arresting officer. I was questioned by the defense attorney and the prosecutor just like a police officer would be. So the skill sets were very, very similar to that. When we moved into the government security side of things, what I was doing there is basically reviewing information to determine whether or not it was classified. Okay? So again, it's this detail-oriented, reading over stuff, doing the research, determining, does this meet this criteria? Just like if you were looking at law. Does this offense, or does this action meet the elements of a crime that you have to be able to talk to? Okay?
So what challenges did you face throughout this whole journey? And what were the things that you discovered so that you can make those connections and switch between those connected fields but still different?
I would start with the first difficulty I ran into was having the college I was at close. not being prepared to move to another college. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, grew up in a small town in Texas. I went to college in Iowa to get away from my small town in Texas. I did not want to go to a college where I would go home on weekends. I wanted this full college experience, which is why I took this opportunity. When it closed, we had to jump through hoops to get accepted to another college. It didn't help that the folks at my high school had told me all along that I wasn't college material. I shouldn't be going to college, and they were less than helpful trying to help me find someplace else to go to college. It was my high school band director who came through. His college roommate was the president at the college I ended up at Ranger Junior College. He made a phone call, got me accepted. Then with an AA, then you've got to transfer again. So to get my bachelor's degree, it took me 4.5 years. I graduated with 140 hours, and I went to 5 different colleges to complete my bachelor's degree. While I was in the Army, I went and acquired my master's degree. And getting my master's degree took me 18 months, from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. 2 nights a week for 18 months straight. So those are things you have to be willing to put the work in to complete the education. Along with these things, challenges that came up, of course, having the contract you're working on canceled, and all of a sudden you're sitting there unemployed. And getting hired in the criminal justice field is not something that I can go down and apply for a job tomorrow and be working next week. The average time from start to finish in the process is about 6 months, because of the background checks you will go through, the very, very thorough vetting of you as a candidate. Generally, when you apply for a position, the very first thing that's going to happen is you're going to take a physical agility test. Then you're going to take a series of written exams. If you get through those 2 things, then you will go to your initial interview. Once you've completed your initial interview, you'll either go to a board interview at that point, or you will go through a psychological evaluation. Once you've completed the psych eval and the board interview, if you are selected for the position, then you will be sent off to the academy. Now, in Florida, it works differently. Florida academy system are run through their technical colleges and community college systems. So those of you studying here will actually go to the academy on your own money. Where I came from initially, you had to be hired by a department, and the department paid for you to go to the academy. Because our academies were residential. You would go in and you would live in their dorms and you would stay on their facilities. And academies run anywhere from, I think the shortest one that I know of currently running is about 8 weeks, to the longest one is 27 weeks. And it just depends upon what state you're in, where you're at, where the academies are going to be located. So getting the position initially, and then understanding that there's more to it than just the academics. There's the physical aspects. You asked earlier about how did the Army and the law enforcement go together. If you can make it through your basic training in any of the military services and understand what they're doing to you there, you're going to do fine at the academy, because the academy is going to do the same thing to you. They're going to come in, they're going to be in your face, they're going to be trying to run you off. Because this is a difficult career field, and unless you want to be there, you don't need to be there. We want people who understand what this is about. This is not a job, this is a calling.
So when you hear students indicate that they want to go into law enforcement, what are some of the, I guess, fields that they are wanting, or industries that they really are wanting? Maybe not so much to be that officer. What are some of the things you hear that they really mean when they say that? And that's
the interesting part. Many people who come into the field tell me they want to help people. That's what it's all about to them, is that helping. We see folks who are interested in working with juveniles. That's a big chunk of students that come in. I want to work with juveniles. Okay. Well, do you want to be a juvenile officer? Do you want to be a juvenile correctional officer? Do you want to be in juvenile probation and parole? Do you want to do counseling? What I'm finding is many of them are coming in thinking they really just want to do the counseling side, which is not the criminal justice side of the coin. But ultimately, to get to some of those counseling jobs, you've got to work your way up through the system. So we see a lot of folks, probation parole is a big draw for many people. Now, generally, in most places, probation parole requires a bachelor's degree. Those who want to be police officers generally want to be detectives. They think they're going to go do that right off the get-go, or they want to be on the SWAT team. So I have to explain to them that there's a process. You don't get to go in at that level. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up. For example, if you want to be on a SWAT team, the people in the department have to know they can trust you, that you're not some kind of loose cannon that they're going to turn loose out there. So you're going to start, you can go as quickly or as slowly as you want to go. Some folks will get there within a year, year and a half. If being a detective is really the hard thing that you want to do, I tell you, go to a small department. Because the smaller the department, the patrol officers are doing most of the investigations. They're doing the detective work. If you really have been watching like Law and Order, and that's the scenario you're interested in, then you're going to start out as a patrol officer and work your way up. And what I've seen with students in the past 20 years that I've been doing this, I've got a lot of students who say they wanted to be a... So again, people go into things thinking they want to do one thing, and then they get into the job and they realize that this is where it's at. The other part of it is when somebody tells me they want to be a police officer, I have to go through a series of questions there. Okay, what do you want to do as a police officer? Are you looking at state? Are you looking at local? Are you looking at county? Are you looking at the federal level? Because all of those have different requirements. Also, they're different jobs. For example, if you want to work for a sheriff's office, as an example, well, you do realize you're going to spend a lot of your time going around serving papers. You're actually going to be knocking on people's door and handing them civil suit papers. You're going to hand them criminal summonses, those kind of things. If you want to work traffic, you probably want to work for the state as a highway patrol officer because that's primarily their function. If people tell me all the time, I want to go to work for the Us Marshals service, okay, you realize the primary function of U.S. Marshals is to work as courtroom security officers. People don't realize these kind of things. The most well-rounded place to work as a police officer is a small city police department because you're going to do it all. You're going to do the patrol. Think about this from a county sheriff's office. We work in rural areas. So we're going to get calls that your city police officer won't. We're going to get a call about cattle out on the highway. City cops aren't getting cattle on the highway calls. Now they'll get a barking dog call. We won't get those out in the county because by the time we would be able to respond, they'd be gone. So I sit down with a student and say, what exactly is it that you're interested in doing? Tell me why you want to do this. And then we'll talk about the best pathway to get there. And in some cases, I flat recommend that they don't do the criminal justice side because what they're going to want is going to require a transfer to a bachelor's program, and we'll go that way. If you want to be a counselor, that's fine. Let's go talk to some folks in a social services program or a human services program where you're going to be able to do that. The other thing that I do, and I want to make this clear to people who are looking at this as a career, they're going to take a look at what you have done in the past. If you have gotten yourself in trouble in the past with the law, be it as a juvenile, be it as an adult, there's going to be some things that we call career killers. If you've ever had an incident of domestic violence, that's going to be a career killer. If you have ever been arrested for DUI, that's going to present a problem. When you go out and apply for the average job today, on your job application, it asks you, have you ever been convicted? In the law enforcement field, we ask, have you ever been arrested? There's a big difference in those two. I won't tell you that this is a total career killer, unless, like I say, there are the ones. Domestic violence is a career killer. DUIs or drug abuse is a career killer. Mental problems is a career killer. For those coming out of the military, depending upon PTSD, those kind of things, those can be a career killer. Now, I won't ever tell somebody they can't try to do this, but I want them to understand the challenges that they're going to be faced with. The other thing we talk about is your social media posting stuff, because we check that. I've had students who were in the interview process who were taken out of the interview process because of pictures they had of themselves posted on spring break of doing things they shouldn't be doing. I had one young man who posed in front of marijuana plants. And I mean, today, when you do things like that, it's out there forever. And in this career field, you've got to understand we're going to go to those levels. The other part of it is when you get in there and you start talking to students about their preconceived notions, because television is wonderful. We have so many shows out there, and I'm not talking about the entertainment type shows. I'm not talking about CSI, and I'm not talking about Law and Order, but you get into things like watching The First 48, which is a very popular show right now. You go back and watch episodes of Forensic Files or the ID channel. You know, these are things that draw people's interest, but they're not reality. You do not solve a murder case in 48 hours like they lead you to believe on these shows. Now, a lot of the things that are there, if you watch those, as I watch them myself, because I learn things from there that I can use. There's the folks out of Memphis, the Memphis Police Department on the First 48, I love watching them. There's this one lady in there, there's a black female sergeant that gets more information doing interviews and interrogation, and it's just phenomenal to watch her work. And those are the things, that's part of this. What people don't understand in this field, every day courts are issuing new rulings. Those new rulings change how we do business and how law is interpreted. So to think when you finish school that you're not finished with school, you're still going. Ever since I got into this business, I go to a minimum of 40 hours of training every year, and it's the equivalent of one college course done in a week every single year, just to keep myself current. In addition to that, I read court cases on a weekly basis. I have a setup where any court cases that come out of that affect very specific things that they download onto my computer, and then I will go read those. And that's something that you're just going to have to get used to doing if this is the direction you want to go. And it's not just from an enforcement, it's from probation and parole. Then we haven't even talked about the correctional officers, the folks who work in the jails and in the penitentiaries or in community-based correction places like halfway houses. That's a whole different skill set. While many of it's the same thing, but now if you think about it, I describe the way the criminal justice systems is this. You have law enforcement out here whose job is to go out, enforce the laws, pick the bad people up, and bring them to corrections where you drop them off. The corrections people become basically the babysitters. They're there to watch over these people, and their most important function is to ensure the safety of these people that are incarcerated. We think about other things, but ultimately, that's not a role you think about when you think about a correctional officer, that your job is to make sure that Johnny the burglar doesn't get beaten up by Freddie the robber. That's a big portion of what you do. And that's a totally different skill set, because now you're basically locked in with these people, and you have to learn how to get along with people, how to get people to do things that normally wouldn't do it, and it's all about respect. And I think correctional officers in many cases kind of get left out of things. They have one of the hardest jobs that are out there.
So did you have someone along the way provide sort of mentorship and advice and really help to cultivate these different career changes? Because you had mentioned you never imagined yourself being on the other end teaching, but at some point you were an adjunct, and then now here you are over a whole program. So was there someone that saw something in you in terms of a particular skill that you didn't even recognize, but then they matched it to a particular job that you would be good at? So were there people like that along the way?
Absolutely. And there have been people like that all along. When I first started into this business, back when I decided I wanted to become a police officer, in my small little town in Texas, there were two people that were really, really key on me doing this. One of them was a guy named Carl Schofield, who was the captain of the local city police department. And the other one was a gentleman I ended up ultimately going to work for named R.C. Johnson, who was the sheriff in Dallam County. They encouraged me. They kept me on track. They would work with me when things were at their toughest. Okay? Then, as you continue on, every person you come in contact with that becomes your boss. A lot of times, professors that I had in college were there. A gentleman that sticks out to me from the college side of the coin was when I was in junior college, and his name was William P. Buckner III. Dr. Buckner was the epitome of the old Southern defense criminal attorney. He is probably about 5'5", heavy set, wore white long sleeve shirts with the sleeves rolled up to the elbow, always had a cigar sticking out of the side of his mouth. And he taught political science. That's how I met him. He taught a political science course at the junior college I was at. And as you know, when you go into a college class, they do this thing, and I'm like, oh, why are you here? What are you doing? What are you studying? And he came around to me, and I introduced myself, and I told him I was studying law enforcement. And I will never forget this, and it set our relationship. He took that cigar out of his mouth, using it as a pointer, and told me that a police officer was nothing more than a paid perjurer for the state. And I kind of got a kick out of it, and I fired back, and we developed a relationship that lasted until the gentleman passed away. He always told me that he always hoped I would get in trouble sometime so he could be my defense attorney. And I'm like, no, this is not happening. But he would challenge me. He challenged my thoughts on things from a perspective that, the law is always right. And he would challenge me on that and make me think things through and argue with him. And it was a phenomenal time. There were so many people that I met while I was in the service that kept me there. And it was the Army who put me in a position where I learned about teaching. I was put in a slot where we were fielding new equipment, and I was put in charge of the development. All of the lesson plan developments for both officer and enlisted. And I'm like, I'm not ready for this. And a guy by the name of Mike Thornton said, yes, you are.
So do you tell students that they need to find those mentors?
Absolutely.
Is it necessary in terms of getting through the ranks? And like you said, you have to start at the bottom.
It's not necessarily from that standpoint that I want it, but what you have to understand, in this career field, you don't go home and talk to your wife about, or your husband about what you did at work today. You can't go home and say, wow, man, you should have seen that dead body scene. You can't do that. And if you don't have somebody within the department or your chain of command that you can share with, and you start internalizing this stuff, you burn out so quickly. So find those people. Be cautious. You can find the wrong ones. I'll be the first to admit that. But find the right ones. And then become one yourself. That's even more key. And I think that's why I still do what I do today. I used to tell people when I was working as a deputy and teaching, I had the best of both worlds. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do, and I loved it. And I was able to share it with people. And I've got an advantage over most college instructors. I'll be the first to tell you this. I live in kind of an idyllic world in my field, because people take my courses because they want to. And that makes a big difference. When you go to college, There are going to be college courses you don't want to take. Speech, math, English. Every college student has to take those. People don't have to take what I take. So I owe it to those who are coming in there to share whatever I can. I have students that I have worked with in the last 25 years now that are scattered all over the United States, from working for the New York City Police Department to the Us Marshals Service to out in, I've got one young man who's now head of a drug task force in Texas. They're scattered all over, and yet they will contact me probably once or twice a year. I stay in contact if that's what they want.
So you've already shared some rewarding aspects of this field from your standpoint. What are some of the least rewarding? What are the cons that students need to be
going
aware
into
of?
this field? Oh, goodness. Well, first of all, you're not ever going to make a lot of money. Second, you need to accept the fact that most people don't like you. You're doing a job that most people don't want to have to deal with. Because think about this for a minute. In your own personal experiences, when you deal with law enforcement, it is generally not a pleasant experience. When the blue lights come on behind you, they are not pulling you over to tell you you won the lottery. Okay? If somebody knocks on your door at 2 o'clock in the morning, it is not good news. And these are things you're going to have to do. You're the one that's going to have to go in at some point, and you're going to arrest a drunken father in front of his children. That's going to leave a scar on those kids, and you're going to try and figure out ways to deal with this. And sometimes you're going to figure out a good way, and sometimes the individuals you're dealing with won't give you options to make it end in a good way. The hardest thing that you're going to have in this field is to realize you can't save everyone. That's the hardest thing in the world. What you have to do is take a look, if you're working, probation parole is a good example of this. For every person that's in the probation parole ranks, 40 to 50% of them are recidivists that have to go back into the system. You focus on the ones you win with. When you tell me you want to work with juveniles, you're setting yourself up for a lot of heartache until you recognize that out of 10 juveniles, you may save 2. And those are the 2 that make the whole job worthwhile.
So, closing remarks, what do you feel are options for students who are interested in being in the general career field? They don't necessarily indicate they want to be law enforcement or in corrections, but they like that environment. What would you say to them in terms of options, and is RAS in criminal justice, is that an option for them to pursue other things within that industry?
The AS in criminal justice will give you some advantages over other people in the career fields. Now, what I would also say is an AA in many cases will also get you those same advantages. Many departments, if you're going to work in this field, pay more money if you have your AS and a BS. There's pay issues there. The other part is, and what I have found, the people who take the criminal justice coursework are taking it because it's interesting and it allows them to study something they want to be studying while they're taking the classes they don't want to take. And it's a balance. And the thing is, if you decide that the criminal justice direction is the way you want to go, that's wonderful. Generally, if you're going to transfer to another university, I'm going to recommend that you go to the AA side. Having said that, we're in the process of getting to roll out a Bachelor of a BAS with a concentration in criminal justice, that you must complete the AS in criminal justice before you go into that. So there's going to be options for those who want to go on for the bachelor's program but don't want to take a lot of the gen ed type coursework. So we're going to have that option available starting in the fall of next year. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in that aspect. The key, I would tell you, when you start into this, take a couple of courses in it. Take the intro course, get an overall view, and then start trying to decide exactly which way you want to go. If you want to go to become a paralegal, as an example, then I'm going to push you out of the criminal justice program. That's not where you need to be. But if you want to work in a correctional facility, maybe starting out as a correctional officer and moving into a counseling role, because you need to go through the steps to get the experience levels. Once you have those experience levels, it's fairly easy to move along. We're seeing a lot of retirements in the criminal justice field right now. Most departments are working shorthanded. Most correctional facilities are working shorthanded. Matter of fact, if any of you that are watching this right now are interested in a job in corrections, come see me. The Florida Department of Corrections would love to visit with you, and I've got the contacts to send you out to talk to them.
Are there, in that, pause for just a second, is because I know in other career fields we encourage students to do internships and shadowing and informational interviews. It's a little bit more difficult in this career field, but what are options for students who want to just get a better sense of what it really is like and if this is really their career path for them?
We do offer some opportunities. We call them, we have practicums that students can take. It is difficult to get them because I have to run you through a full-blown investigation, criminal background investigation, the whole 9 yards. The reason we don't put a lot of students in it, because most students who are going to do that are going to transfer, and they're going to need to take that at a much higher level because they won't accept what they did here as being that. So they would take it, if they went to UCF, they would take it their senior year. So there are things there. I do require, in some of my courses, I require you to do a ride-along with law enforcement. I do require you to go out and have interviews with them. And I highly encourage any of you who have the opportunity to attend a Citizens Police Academy in your community. If you really want to see what it's about, go to that Citizens Police Academy. And even if it's just something you've kind of thought about, go to it. It is worth your time to see what these guys really do. Generally, they're 6 to 8 weeks in length, one night a week. It gives you a pretty good eye-opening experience.
Now, is training for security detail, for example, we have Miller on campus here. We're getting ready to do an exploration trip to Amway Center, and I know Andy Frame Security Services. Do they have their own training?
Yes, in the state of Florida, they have their own training program. Depending upon whether you're armed or unarmed, it's going to run 40 hours is the minimum. And those are, again, run through some of the technical schools. We do not offer that training here because it doesn't really fit in on the academic side. It is more of a, what's the word I want to use here? It's a mandated state training, more like an academy.
But is it helpful for someone to go through that if they're unsure, if they want to do the full-blown?
Probably not.
No.
If you want to go to work in a security company, and a lot of people, what you have to understand about security companies for the most part are not the guys like we've got here on campus. They're guys who will end up working at a football stadium, handling things. It is a job people take as a part-time job to help pay their way through college or those type of things. Now, when you get into the high-end outfits, one that comes to mind off the top of my head was a company called Wackenhut, who did some really high-end security. They provided security officers for military installations and those type of things. And those groups, when you hire on with them, they will put you through the training. And it's every state is different. Some states require a significant amount. When I was doing it in Missouri, it was a 5-day training that was run through the St. Louis Police Academy. Here, as I said, it's a 5-day training run through your technical schools. In some places, in Kentucky, there is no training requirement. So it varies from place to place.
So what are other options then, besides the academy and going that route? If someone just likes that environment, they just like being in that environment, but they don't want to necessarily be the officer.
You could look at sometimes courthouse security. There'll be a shorter version of an academy. There's a 1 week thing that just teaches you how to take care of things inside of the courtroom. You could look at going into communications and dispatch. And again, you're still going to go off for training, but now you're sitting inside. And I will tell you that the dispatchers have as hard, if not harder, of a job than the officers out in the field do. Because not only are you handling one officer, you're handling a multitude, and you may be handling both fire and law and medical. So you've got a whole lot of things going on there. There's some very specific training. The good thing is somebody coming right out of high school today can go into that line of work while they're waiting.
What about like IT? Are they...
Okay, the IT side of the coin, there are cybercrime units, okay? That's going to take a significant amount of training and experience, because that's not something you can go to school and get the cybersecurity certificates that we offer. That's not going to get you hired. I've been in places where we've offered degrees in computer forensics. That's wonderful. But a 19-year-old with a degree in computer forensics is not going to get hired on to be a computer forensics person for a department. But that is certainly an area in which I would look at, because cybercrime is growing exponentially right now, especially on the private side. So looking at getting that degree and going to work for, we'll just use Disney as an example. You know, Disney's being attacked left and right all of the time. Look at all of the ransomware things that are going out there. So certainly opportunities exist there for people with that kind of a background. And it's a different kind of crime to investigate, because now we're off in the Ethernet looking for this stuff. It's not like going out here and chasing somebody with blue lights and a siren. You're chasing them virtually, and that there are some really interesting aspects to that.
Well, what about the people that just maintains the computers at the station? Does that require them to have an added level of
But
clearance?
most of those are contracted positions with IT departments. Okay. And, you know, unfortunately, since we belong to either a county entity or state entity or city entity, the city, state, or county is going to provide that. So that's not something that we would have. Now, there's administrative positions that are available within the departments that people can do. There are some training positions that are available within departments.
Do they still want you to have that background, though, of having been a police officer at one point,
or some
military?
training, or they generally are going to look at that. You know, I go back to, like, sheriff's departments are responsible in many places for collecting taxes. So now we're looking for people with a background in accounting. So there's a lot of different directions you can go. And that's why my best suggestion to anybody who's interested in this, call me, we'll sit down, we'll talk about it, and I'll be able to at least point you in the right direction or introduce you to somebody who might be able to give you a feeling for what exactly it is that they do.
I think that's a great place to end our career exploration with you, Mr. Bridgman. Again, tell them where you're located and how they can reach you, what days you're on campus or have office hours, etc.
Okay, I am in the Science and Math Building, room 217 on the Leesburg campus. I'm generally here by 7:30 in the morning. I'm usually around until about 2:30 in the afternoon. If I'm out of the office, there will be a note on the door that says how to get in touch with me. You can reach me by phone at 352-323-3636, or you can reach me on my cell phone at 270-348-5032. Please understand, if you call my cell phone, I do not answer it after 5 p.m. And if you don't leave a message, I don't call you back.
Well, there you go.
I'm getting looks like, why are you giving your cell phone? It's in my course syllabus. Every student gets my cell phone. Because bottom line is, you're going to have questions. And if you've got them, call me. I'll do the best I can to help you. And generally, I am at Southlake this semester on Wednesdays, and I'm in the library from 11 until 1.
What about email? Do you respond?
Oh, yeah. I'll respond to your emails if you want to send me an email. I'll be the first to tell you I prefer talking to people than I do an email, because emails are hard to. But if you need to email me, I can be reached at Bridge, BRIDGEMG, at lssc.edu.
All right. Thank you very much. Reach out to him if you've got questions. He's one of our great instructors here at Lake Sumter State College.
Peace out.